watching my parents chase their dreams really was the inspiration for me chasing mine. In that first company I sold and I had I was taken advantage of, it took me about 24 hours to get to that place where I could find gratitude. I was mad, I was frustrated, I was upset, I was being taken advantage of. And that really is the secret sauce of how to grow and scale companies.
So systemized, and the sequencing behind it is truly
It
inspirational.
was those moments of gratitude that brought the success that I have today. No, I don't. That's a really cool idea. My entire life, my entire being is tied to this. AI to do things like that is going to speed up our success in ways that I don't even think we comprehend yet. If I felt like we have an Achilles heel, an issue today, it's exactly what you just talked about.
Infinite, literally infinite with it.
It is truly infinite because
Gonna impact everything. That's where I'm putting all my focus in right now, is like
sure,
building the AI infrastructures, but also
agreed. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that Donald Trump, fundamentally, like this isn't a political statement at all. Like him, love him, don't love him. I think at his core, he's a business person. I think he
exactly.
thinks at the speed of business. I don't think he's fundamentally a politician. I think he's fundamentally a business person. How do we solve our infrastructure? Because the infrastructure solves everything. It goes back to that fun. It's like it's you think like a business person, right? Like, what is the fundamental process I have to fix that fixes everything? That's why I love decentralization, right? Like to me, it's like democratize all of this, right? Like create a free market frenzy to allow
See where
people to
everything's going.
benefit and
Yep.
see where it goes. Like
Helps one employment, but two, the housing itself too. With
correct.
all the real estate that would be built.
I think I probably would go back to my 22, 23-year-old self and I would say,
All right, welcome everyone. Today on the Simple Media podcast, we have a special guest, Eddie Wilson. You guys probably seen him online with him being the king of exits in private equity, along with the Aspire Tour. And yeah, welcome to the show, Eddie.
thank
Pleasure to
you.
have you.
Appreciate it. Always good to be on.
So I always start off with a segment of growing up, and I know with you, both your parents played an inspirational role in building out your dreams, as they both did. They went from poor to wealthy. And was there a book, or was it a combination of them and also like your surroundings and the talks you would have at dinner that inspired you to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. My mom and dad are both entrepreneurs. They both have that entrepreneurial spirit. And I would say that watching my parents chase their dreams really was the inspiration for me chasing mine because I started off in corporate America first. That's where I, cut my teeth and had success there. And so when you have success in corporate America, it's rewarded by, growth, up the ladder or it's financial success. And to step away from that while I was actually at the top of my game was a moment of, of fear, anxiety, stress. And knowing that my parents had really built what they had built and I watched them build it, it became very, inspirational for me as well in that I didn't deal with the fear of like, I wonder if I can make it, and so it wasn't a book. It really wasn't my college education. It was the fact that I had a couple of parents, both parents who chased their dreams and I got to watch that play out.
No, I love that. And I come from a similar family where both parents are entrepreneurs. And a lot of times you mentioned where your dad asked you, what times do you want me to be there to show up for you? And
Mhm.
that is something I could relate to, because my dad would either drive me to school or be at my soccer games. And those were like the
Mhm.
main points where I really valued my time with him, along with the one of most things I was probably grateful for from my childhood was the experience of traveling,
Mhm.
and just that opening up the whole world of traveling and really
Sure.
new cultures and everything else. What else did your parents relay onto you? I know your mom was big on gratitude.
My mother was very big on gratitude. I lost two siblings when I was younger,
Mm.
and the life lessons of having massive loss in your life can either create ceilings in your life, it creates a limitation, or it creates a catalyst. And my mom, very emotionally intelligent, would talk about gratitude. Gratitude's a catalyst that when you're in the valley, when you're in your lowest point, if you can find moments to be grateful for, if you can find the lessons there, they become catalysts for growth. And so most people that go through loss or they suffer, issues in their life, they can really seed inside of their subconscious, and that becomes a subconscious limitation where it's like, well, I'm just the person who is this. It becomes their identifier. When my mom would push me towards gratitude, that gratitude essentially removes that ceiling and you just blow through it. And so, that's what has happened to me so much in my life that, you mentioned me as the king of exits. It's like, but I wasn't always the king of exits. I actually got taken advantage of in my first exit and probably left $30 million on the table. But it was the lessons of a mother who would preach gratitude to me, like find gratitude, no matter how hard it is, no matter how much you feel like it's not going your way. Find gratitude, and it was those moments of gratitude that brought the success that I have today.
Gotcha. And how long did you analyze those moments? Because I know you said you regretted not doing it at the moment of your sister's funeral. When
Yeah.
did you come about that?
So, that is a process of growth, right? Like, I was too young to really understand that at my sister's funeral. At my brother's funeral, when I was, older, um, I felt a sense of gratitude while experiencing grief.
Mm,
When in that first company I sold and I had I was taken advantage of, it took me about 24 hours to get to that place where I could find gratitude. I was mad, I was frustrated, I was upset, I was being taken advantage of. It took me about 24 hours. Today, I believe I'm shortening that time because I see it's like once you practice anything that gives you what you ultimately want, then the focal point becomes on how much faster can I get there. And so um, I um, I would say this year alone in June, Andrew and I, my business partner, we had a big investor who owes us a lot of money. And a lot of the growth of the company was based on this person paying me um, what they were contracted to pay me. In one phone call, I lost $63 million worth of funding that I had expected to happen between June and the end of the year. Not like it was like a hope so. It's contracted, like litigation, all of that.
yeah.
And I remember calling a meeting within 1 hour of that phone call, and I put our executives around the table. I was like, guys, what we're going to do is I believe that this is going to be the catalyst for the best growth we've ever had. We just lost $63 million in funding that's contracted to us, that's built into our budgets, and every day we operate on that money. And we were headed down this path. I'm willing to put some capital in. I'm willing to make some things right. But in the end, I'm very grateful for this moment. And I began to share gratitude with them. That took me 1 hour. And the growth that we've been on post that moment just this year, right back in June, has been exponential, and it's because I found gratitude in that moment. So it's about speeding that time frame up where you don't just feel lost. You feel lost, and you understand if I can get to a place where I can appreciate what this loss is bringing me, what lesson it's teaching me, what opportunity it's bringing me. You can get there faster and faster and faster.
Gotcha. And I love that transformational leadership relaying that gratitude onto your team. Where did that come about? Because as you mentioned before, you were sort of forced an exit at 24.
Hmm.
And one quick uh, loop we'll go into is after that exit, you said you mentioned you bought the house in Charleston and the Ferrari, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you had that for about a week when after you had the phone call with your dad
Yeah.
that
So
convinced you
actually,
otherwise.
yeah, so I had an exit before that. That was my first exit, but my first true exit was not a company. It was I'd sold a television program
Yep.
to a national broadcasting outlet, and that's when I bought the car, bought the house. Had a
Oh,
conversation with
okay.
my father, who said, "Hey, you're a third generation real estate investor. Why are you? You've been given this gift. Why would you squander this gift? Like find investments." I ended up investing in a bunch of rental properties in Ohio with my dad after that point. And those are the assets that really took me to my early first, peak in net worth.
And you mentioned those were student housing, correct? That you still
Yep.
hold to this day?
Yep, we still hold them. There's a lot of them now. We've transitioned. The Northeastern Ohio College of Medicine there did not have enough. So it was the college medical school, right? So you have 4 years of college, and then they come in for 3 to 4 years worth of medical school. And so really great tenants, like these kids are studying to be doctors. They've already completed typically their undergrad. And so my father saw the opportunity there. We started building housing and really started creating housing for those students that would come in for 3 or 4 years during med school. Now the medical school got very savvy and realized that other people were providing housing, so they finally started building all their student housing there. So we've definitely
Mm,
transitioned. We're probably 50% of the units are still student housing, but yeah, we've had to transition into other areas. But yeah, we still hold those assets today.
gotcha. And then back to the transformational leadership. Did you
Yeah.
come across that when you were building the Empire operating system? Or was
No,
it
Empire
more?
operating system came much, much later. Came in about 2014, 15.
Mm,
Leadership for me was always something I studied, mainly because I was so young in corporate America. I used to wear a suit and tie every day to work in my 20s because most people would not give me the time of day, and I wanted to lead. And what I realized is it wasn't my presence that created a like what you called transformational leadership. It was my ability to control my emotions and have emotional intelligence that actually caused people to lead. 50-year-old person will be led by someone who has enough emotional intelligence to make right choices. I thought in my early days I'd wear a suit and tie when everybody else wasn't quite dressed up as much as I was, because I thought I have to hold this position of authority by my presentation. And it wasn't presentation at all, it's emotional intelligence. And so as I began to study that in my early days, I was just trying to qualify myself for leadership. I was trying to qualify myself to grow and to have other people follow, not because I wanted followers, but because I believed that was the only path of growth in corporate. So I've been studying leadership for close to 20 years now, and it was really as just a way to climb the corporate ladder. What I realize now is leadership is very different than what I believed about it in my younger days. Leadership, now I have my philosophies on leadership. I've written a book called The Titan Doctrine on 8 principles of leadership. Like I study it, I teach it, I try to live it. And to me, leadership is one of those things that's um, it's so lacking in the workplace today. There's so few people that are willing to truly lead.
gotcha. And the point on emotional intelligence that is probably something I always try to relate to, especially when I'm like talking to my younger self, whether that's to my younger brother or to my audience. That, on top of being your true authentic self, it just relate it as an energy that people feel, and then
Mhm.
they want to jump on board with your movement.
Sure.
And then let's go back into the private equity. So you started your first firm, and now you have the second one with Andrew, correct?
Correct.
Tell me how about the first one, how you managed to get those exits. I believe it
Sure.
was 76 in 1 year.
76 in 1 year. You've been studying. I appreciate that. The I built that firm with a couple of partners, and the first 30 companies were a part of the first acquisition I made. I was investing in an insurance company that came with a bunch of others. Um, and in that, I stepped in as a minority partner owner, but then also the managing partner. So I negotiated where I didn't have to take all ownership in order to take control. What I did was I
Mm,
took minority ownership and control and began to lead it. I turned those 30 companies into 86 at its peak. And so those are 86 truly operational companies with employees, with leaders, with, buildings, these are not like a real estate asset I'm calling a company. These are physical companies. And so 86 of those, it took me about 5.5 years. And what really was the catalyst from the 30 to the 86 was the Empire operating system. That's where the Empire operating system came into play. Was I had these 30 companies that, you know, probably less than five of them were truly profitable, and they carried all the rest of them. So I had 25 underperforming assets. Um, and I was trying to get all 25 to at least perform. And what I realized is I didn't have a common language, I didn't have common KPIs, I didn't have a common leadership, I didn't have kind of the common ethic and structure. And realized I had to build something because I'd pulled stuff off the shelf, I'd used other systems, and just none of them were one size fits all. In that, every business operates in a very specific phase. And if you speak to that business outside of the phase it's in, you're going to get the wrong result. Real quick
Mm,
on that, the five phases of business are startup, perseverance, that's the pre profit phase, viability, which is right people, right seats, scale, and then lastly, succession. So those would be the five phases. So you can't, speak to a business that's in startup the same way you would a business that's in scale, right? Like they're two fundamentally different processes.
yeah,
So what
most
I
definitely.
did was I built a proprietary system to understand where these businesses are and then what action to take. Then I overlaid the action based on what phase they were in. So all 30 of those companies were in different phases, and everything kind of changed in how I operated. But they had the same language, the same process, same measurement standards, things like that. That was the Empire operating system. Then I basically proved that model by taking it from 30 companies to 86 companies. And then in 2019, I sold 76 in 1 year.
Oh wow. And then with the Empire operating system, it's more of like a sequencing for their phase. And with the different phases, I know you want to go more into the viability phase. So where you're outside of it and it's a machine running on itself, but you're
Correct.
still like providing the significance into it,
Hmm.
but
Yes.
you don't have to be there to actually have it run.
Correct. We say that one good indicator of whether you're in true viability or not is you've removed single points of failure.
Hmm.
That's a big issue in most small businesses. They have single points of failure. They have one person, if they left, the entire thing folds, right? It's why a lot of personality based businesses struggle to scale, is because they're not truly viable. They have single points of failure. Well, the first single point of failure that most small businesses have is the person that's operating it, the person that's actually the fundamental operator of that business. So, in getting to viability, I have to be able to remove myself. If I can truly remove myself, where I'm not necessary, I'm significant, right? Like in a business where I'm in viability, I still can provide a lot of significance. I can bring customers, I can sell, I can build relationships, I can provide strategy, but I'm not necessary. If I walked away, the business could still operate without me. That's a really good indicator that you're in a truly viable company. And we always say you never want to go to scale until you prove that your methods are viable, that your business is viable. Because oftentimes what happens is people try to scale out of perseverance. They don't have the right people, they don't have the right capital, they don't have the right processes. And so what they do is they try to throw gas on that fire, and all of a sudden it just exposes all the real underlying issues of that business. Now you're just scaling something that's already painful, and it creates more pain. It's why so many business owners come to me and say, Eddie, I'm really struggling. I'm doing 7 million, 8 million, 10 million. I'm scaling, but man, my life is a disaster. I can't take a vacation. I'm stuck, working 80 hours in this business. It's because they actually tried to scale from perseverance, not from viability.
Quick break from the podcast. I'd like to thank you guys for listening in, and I hope you have a lot of value. Eddie Wilson is having a live masterclass online for Empire Operating System. It's going to be down below. First link, go check it out. I'll be on there too. Gotcha. And now you have the new private equity firm as a Rob structure with Andrew, correct?
I do. Yep.
That's
A lot of structure.
Inspire Collective,
Collective Influence
Collective
is the
Influence.
private equity firm. And Andrew and I do own that under what's called the ROB structure inside of our self directed IRAs.
Gotcha. And did Andrew come to you with the Rob structure, I believe, with all
He
the
did.
different accounts and then
Andrew, I come from a family that has at least some level of acumen in this in this kind of space, right? I
Yeah.
didn't grow up, I grew up with, a lot of people in my world that understood finance and taxes and accounting. Um, and Andrew, for years, would just come to me and talk to me about random tax structures. He would talk to me about ROBs. He would talk to me about everything from Roth self-directed IRAs to CISA plans to he's been studying this stuff for 15 years,
Yeah.
maybe longer. And I just didn't know a lot about it. And so I kind of just thought, well, I'm paying very, high paid tax architects and CFO or CPAs and, people that have licenses and know what they're doing. I was kind of shocked that he would know something more than they would know.
Mhm.
When Andrew proved it to me is when he actually brought me Mitt Romney's tax returns. It's something that he talks about at the Aspire Tour. When he talks about, he always says like, how did Mitt Romney get all this money in his self-direct or in his retirement account, and when he only made this many transactions? And he actually brought me Mitt Romney's tax returns during that president when Mitt Romney was running for president, and he was like, "You explain this to me." And that was actually the first time I was like, "Yeah, maybe I don't understand what's actually going on here." That was when Andrew first started hitting me up on Rob's. It took him a few years, and after my big exit, before I actually started operating in this manner. I've always had self-directed IRAs. My family kind of, has always been a part of that. But I did not understand a Rob structure. I didn't understand some of the higher levels of tax-free architecture.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then I see that Andrew is like the tax architect and just
Mm,
testing all the ideas and running
yeah,
it with his team. And then the companies you guys buy out, so it's all under.
yeah,
And so Aspire's under that whole private equity firm, and you guys are on a 50-50 with your Roth, correct?
correct. Yes, you
Gotcha.
got it.
And isn't there 1% that's left in the C Corp? That's
Yes.
what I was wondering. So is that 1% like a physical person or
No, it's a corporation outside of it.
okay,
Yeah.
understood.
Yep.
Gotcha. And do you run your own private equity firm under that Rob structure now too?
So I don't have a private equity firm anymore. I sold completely out of mine. I still have some assets that are outside of the Robs. The thing is once you operate companies, outside of Robs, it's really hard to get them into it. You really need to
Yep.
start new companies or acquire companies through it for that really to make sense. There's a lot of hoops to run through to get to where Robs is formalized. Which, if anybody wants to do research on, it's called the Robs Rollover Business Structure. Right, that's kind of the acronym for it.
Yep.
There's not a lot written on this, but you can find some things about it. But um, then I still have companies like Think Realty, the American Association of Private Lenders, Go Media. I've still got probably another 6 to 8 companies that are outside of my Rob structure that I still pay normal tax on and try to get as many write-offs and deductions, all the stuff that Andrew talks about. I still kind of play that game over there.
Gotcha. And going back a little bit, how did you build out the like executive team and all your employees? Because that's something that hiring like a person will that can do multiple things versus hiring like two C people that you're just running all around and you're still
Yeah,
working on
I've got a very specific philosophy on this, but it really comes down to what phase of business you're in.
it.
I would never hire a C player ever. I don't believe in it. But I also don't qualify them as a C player based on their experience. There are 3 things that I look for. Number one, I look for, and I use a system called predictive index. I use a predictive index to ultimately help me understand someone's drive. I call it the head interview. What are you driven to do? Because if I can get an alignment with what you're driven to do, you'll come to work motivated and doing it every single day, right? There's 4 big criteria inside of that, but that's predictive index. Then I do what's called the heart interview. That's culture, core values. That's on the alignment of how we're going to mesh based on our core values and how we lead, how we feel, how we connect, right? And then lastly, it's your experience. I actually de-emphasize experience. I grow so many people internally because I have a system. Everybody gets trained on Empire. Everybody runs Empire, as fast as we possibly can. I still have businesses inside of the private equity firm here that are not effectively on Empire, but I'm pushing, like, one of the big mandates that I have, before the end of the year is like everybody will be on Empire. It's like if they're a newer company, like I put deadlines on them. So I'm teaching and training internally. So I really I weight more their drive and their core values of how I determine if they're an A, rather than their experience. Experience, I think, is one of the worst indicators of how to hire someone. Oftentimes, you hire somebody that's a rock star and they have all this experience, but they also bring baggage. They bring the ways that they've always done things. They bring, sometimes negative experiences. They bring also massive expectations. So for me, that's usually not the path I take. There are some times where I can't avoid it. Like we started buying tax firms this year, tax accounting firms. Um, we bought one in New York City, Charleston, and we're opening up one in Jacksonville. Well, I had to have a subject matter expert and somebody licensed in order to do that one, right? Well, I didn't have that internally and I didn't have time to grow it. So I acquired a company that I knew what Danielle Michelle's she's the CEO of our Checkmate Tax Advisory, and she is the A player that I went after. But her drives aligned with me, her core values aligned with me, and then the acquisition came when I needed her subject matter expert, and so now I'm allowing her to play in the equity of this business with me. And so that's kind of how I typically build. Now, I also always keep a bench because I'm constantly acquiring, selling, buying, growing. I have a bench of people that are already readily trained, and I fractionalize them. So, like for instance, on call, I have fractional COOs. That's through the Empire operating system. As a matter of fact, the consulting side of Empire actually fractionalizes the people that I use in my business to build operations. You can actually hire one of my fractionals to go in and do it in your business, right? Like I
Interesting.
actually farm that out. Like, and what it does is it keeps them on their toes, and it allows me to have this bench of people that I don't always have to pay for. So, second of all, I have fractional CROs, chief revenue officers. Oftentimes, what's missing in a business is not, I can shore them up operationally, typically within 30 days. But oftentimes, I have to drive revenue to make them viable. And so I have fractional CROs, chief revenue officers. And then lastly, we have fractional chief financial officers. So we have fractional CFOs. So I have these fractional teams that are all really trained by Empire, that operate inside of the consulting firm Empire, but also I pull them into my business as I acquire, and then I will then build a full-time team that's going to take that. So it allows me to buy a company and I don't have to, like, the question I get asked all the time, like when somebody's like, oh, you're in private equity, you probably just buy, companies and, fire a bunch of people and hire a bunch of new people. It's like, that's not how it works. What I
Right.
actually do is I buy companies hoping that everyone will stay with good attitudes. And then what I do is I bring in my fractional teams to then teach, train, and get them up to speed to operate the way I will. If they won't operate within that structure, then we may have to move on from them. But my goal is to keep every single person, because if that company is going to grow, the last thing I want to do is take my most valuable resource, which is people, and discard it. I'd rather actually get them to a level of performance they've never been, to give me a value in the company that has never existed, to then add on new people to continue to grow and scale. And that really is the
Right.
secret sauce of how to grow and scale companies.
That's a very interesting way to do it. Like, so systemized, and the sequencing behind it is truly inspirational.
Thank you.
And with that said, was there a time where you were trying to relay information between your employees, try to teach someone to be the you in the business? Were you using like a recording method that was used like along with a SOP? How do you like actually teach your employees?
Yeah. We have a systematic way of teaching and training. We use systems like Trainual and others to help them understand. We try to record and systemize it.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you, the way that I do it today, is a little bit different in that I'm not trying to create more me's. What I'm trying to do is create better versions of the leaders I already
Yep.
have. In my early days, I thought I just had to replicate myself. And there's a flaw in that because no one is uniquely gifted like I am, and I'm not uniquely gifted like the next guy beside me.
Yeah,
What I
yin and
find is,
yang.
yeah. So what I find is that I actually just need people operating at their highest functional level. So I made a big shift about 5 years ago, and I started really following a guy by the name of Larry Yatch. Larry Yatch built a company called SEAL Team Leaders. He wrote a book called How Leadership Actually Works. It fundamentally shifted how I believed I needed to replicate leadership in my business. I had leadership philosophy, but I was trying to overlay, let's say, it was very cookie cutter. I would say things like, "Oh, one of the best CEOs that we have in predictive index is what's called a captain. Therefore, I just need more captains that operate this way, this way, this way, and then I can run my company. It'll give me success." What I actually need is very different. I need people with the highest functioning level because the higher somebody functions and coordinates action between themselves and leads themselves, that's the emotional intelligence part. The more they understand the gaps that they need, and they'll draw people to them that actually make a better systematic whole of a group of people that it takes to lead the company. Um, I was so fascinated by this that I tried to get Larry to come work for us. He wouldn't. And so when Andrew and I started Collective Influence, we bought Larry's company. Larry now works for us. His whole entire job is to help our leaders essentially coordinate action, break through those functional ceilings to get the highest functioning human that I can get, right? Because what I know is that it's not about creating another Eddie Wilson in the business. It would be about creating another Adrian in the business or another Danielle in the business and getting them to their highest functioning level, and then allowing them at their highest functioning level to understand the gaps that they need to in order to grow. Some of the fastest growing companies we have today, one of them is the coffee company that I own in the southeastern part of the country. It's operated on by somebody who is night and day different than I am. But our goal is to get him to his highest functioning level. So
Mm.
I really made a big shift here, and it's a more holistic shift on what I believe about people, their energy, how they connect with others, and how they can grow. What I really need is for individuals to lead themselves and get to their highest functional level.
Gotcha. And do you add a gamification inside of your business that they do outside of work to that?
No, I don't. That's a really cool idea. But no, I don't. That's a really interesting opportunity. We do add some gamification in various pieces, like in training and growth, but
Mm,
not in functional leadership. That's an interesting thought.
gotcha. And do you have an operating system for yourself, like a second brain or
Sure,
anything?
I do. It's called Empire. What's
Mm,
interesting is Empire is a system of um, is a system of principles. It's not business principles. These principles overlay in your business as well as your own personal life. I'll give you a couple of for instances. Oftentimes, we're coming up to the end of the year, and we say, "Oh, have you set your goals for 2025?" Well, if you set your goals for your business the way you set for yourself, right? How successful would your business be? If you said, well, this year I want to get more in shape, I want to eat healthier, I want to acquire this many more assets, I want to build my net worth to whatever, and then you didn't have a systematic way to track it, you're never going to get there, right? So Empire states that most people can't hold responsibility for more than 13 weeks at a time. I believe in the sprint methodology. You should recreate your new goal set every 13 weeks, and then you should set milestones to essentially achieve those in that 0 to 13-week period. And it should be tracked and it should be measured. We always say we set our goals quarterly, but we measure it weekly.
yep.
Are you measuring your prog? What if you decided you're gonna set your goal and like this is how different it is? Like, what if you said I'm gonna be more healthy in 2025? Okay, what's that look like? Well, for the first quarter, I'm gonna lose 5 pounds. I'm going to make sure that I'm eating, I'm going to count my macros, whatever it is. Like you set the parameters. And then you say, now I'm going to measure that every Tuesday. And every Tuesday, I'm going to make adjustments to make sure that I get to what's going to happen is at the end of that 13 week, you're going to be successful. The problem is that these principles need to be overlaid on our life. I overlay the principles of Empire on my personal life. I set my own personal goals every 13 weeks. I set milestones to get there. I measure them and look at them weekly. You have to have a place to capture it all, right? Like, what's the system that's telling you, reminding you, helping you
Yeah.
track and make sure that there's metrics to gain that growth. A second one that I use all the time is what we call our brick. Our brick is our fundamental core um, key performance. So I was going to say KPI, but there's really three types of KPIs, but key performance indicator that drives growth, scale, and also velocity in my business.
Mm.
But it has to be tied to your purpose. Um, I have a brick in my own life. And also you have to measure your bricks weekly. Oftentimes you want to get the best result, you measure your bricks daily. But for me, I call it dollars of impact. My entire life is centered around how much money can I make to give away to make an impact on someone else. My entire life, my entire being is tied to this. I have bricks I measure every single week, which is how many dollars of impact am I giving away, generating and giving away to continue to grow and scale my nonprofit, my global nonprofit called Impact Others. Well, I have a brick in every one of my businesses. I have a brick in my personal life. But also, one of the fundamental things is that you also have to speak about that brick. You have to talk about it internally. My kids in my personal life, my three boys, they know what my brick is, and we talk about it on a consistent basis, right? So, like, Empire is a universal system that isn't what I realized in the beginning, was this isn't just something that is going to help me grow and scale a business. It's going to help me grow and scale my life.
Mhm. No, most definitely. And that systemization of James Clear puts it best. You don't fall to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Correct.
And that second brain is really a system you need that first you have to identify that 2.0 version of yourself and then really systemize and track it and measure it. Like I've built like a simple life operating system for the past 2 years. I've used different softwares between it, but basically it's a second brain where
Mhm.
I'm able to be on a walk and transcribe my whole voice of a podcast I'm listening to, and it
Mhm.
can link to any area of my life. And then at the end of the day, I review it
Right.
along with a whole personal and business non-negotiable tracker. But I really am a systems guy, and ever since a kid, I've been diving into systems. So, do you first identify those bricks before you jump into anything?
No, I actually architect the brick specific to what I want to generate
Mm,
my outcome to be. Um, if I had the time, and I don't today necessarily to actually teach the brick, but it's like the brick is how I scaled a company from 40 million to 800 million in 4.5 years. And it's because I had a fundamental focus on the one thing that drove everything. And every business has that. Every vertical has that. Your life has that. That if you focused on one thing, it's like, and it's kind of that law of first things or first mentions. It's the base root of everything. It's like
yeah,
most people are dealing with, they go through their day and they're dealing with the the cause, or, they're dealing with like the fallout, but they're never dealing with the root cause.
yeah, like the
And so
busyness, but yeah,
exactly. So the brick is what we would say is that basis. It's the root. And
mm,
so all focus there starts to create clarity and success in every other piece. Most people just can't see it. Once they see it and they implement it, it actually solves a lot of problems in their business, but it also creates massive scale and velocity.
gotcha. And then on top of that, how do you amplify like the leverage with like coding, collaboration, and
Yeah.
content?
Yeah, so that's something that as a new organization, we're 2 years old, that we are still struggling with. I feel like my previous firm, like we really had that dialed in. This firm is something that I'm struggling to get that implemented. We have a lot of new parts and pieces, and so I just bought a company called Praxis, or we're in we're in like the final phases of this purchase, and that's exactly what they do. They're essentially a data company that helps you understand the commingled points of data between an organization. Like they go into big corporations, tie all the data points together to show you this like kind of mind map of how everything ties together.
Hmm.
We're in a last phase of acquisition of them because I actually want to provide that for people, especially like with Empire and all the business stuff that we do. But also, I needed it desperately in our business. With as fast as AI and data and communication is moving today, I feel like we're always playing catch up there. Like if I felt like we have an Achilles heel, an issue today, it's exactly what you just talked about, and it's really because we've grown so fast in the last 18 months.
Gotcha. And then on top of that, are you going to combine it with like your own private in-house AI
Mhm.
and
I
creating your
want
own
to.
LLM?
That's what I really would. That's the direction I really would like to go. I think AI for me, I get asked that question like, what would you invest in today? What's your investment thesis? And I talk about how fascinated I am with regard to AI and what it does. I'm not talking about AI products that people are selling. What I'm talking about is AI that leads me to
Infrastructure.
structure, but also faster decision making process and the proper way to assimilate data. Like for instance, I heard a stat the other day that said Salesforce has more data based on company and customer than any other entity in the world. However, less than 2% of the data is actually queried to make a decision based on the data itself. Meaning,
Interesting.
this data exists, these
But
companies
it's
are
not learning.
generating it, but it's not doing anything. It's not actually generating a pathway to success. That's where I think true AI success is going to come in my company. Is like we have all this data. Think about Aspire Tour and all these like massive data points that we're pulling in, and we're buying data to essentially deepen the record of every person that ever goes to an Aspire Tour. We're buying data on that person to deepen the record, understand them. Well, you need tools like AI to process so much faster to understand even what question to ask this data. Like where should I be looking? And so programming AI to do things like that is going to speed up our success in ways that
Mm.
I don't even think we comprehend yet.
No, it's the amount of exponential growth. It's like someone would think it's a little bit, but it's infinite, literally infinite with it.
It is truly infinite because I have a team of data analysts, and they just sit there and all day long crank through data, and they're cranking through financial data and consumer data, and in the end what they generate um, is limited to the time and their ability to actually process that data, right? Like
Hmm.
they can come up with the questions to ask, but then they have to process and essentially pull that data in to actually tell the story to answer the question they're asking or that we're asking.
Exactly.
AI asks the question, pulls the data, sends you the report all simultaneously without ever having to have thought about what question do I need to be asking, right? Like you think about like what it does is it condenses it down, and oftentimes it does it. If you have fast enough processing speed, right? Like it can do it within seconds, So it's pretty wild to look at where I believe as an organization will go, and I think our true enterprise value is going to be tied to the data we generate and what the AI does with that data long term.
Exactly. And then it learns on itself. And there's different LLMs that are coming out or different areas. There's LLMs, which are large language models. There's LQMs, but something I'm interested in right now is LQQMs that I've thought of, which is putting the qualitative and quantitative together and then
Mm,
having it learn on itself. And every time you're prompting it and feeding it with that data, you have that infrastructure where you're just able to replicate it anywhere. And
right. It's good.
the
It's
amount
awesome.
that AI is really just going to impact everything. That's
Mhm.
where I'm putting all my focus in right now is like
Sure.
building the AI infrastructures, but also having the private equity firm where I'm able to invest into the data centers and then also the energy side to fund those data centers because that's why Nvidia is insane right now. Everyone's begging them for GPUs, and
Mhm.
they just came out with a Blackwell infrastructure where they're setting that up all around the world.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know.
It's pretty
It's
fascinating.
really the AI revolution right now. Like
Mhm.
we've seen the industrial revolution, but this is a whole nother level.
Agreed. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm looking at I'm looking at energy models as well. I've done a lot in oil and gas, and there's a lot of gas that just gets burned off into the atmosphere because oil that's connected to gas is way more valuable.
Hmm.
Um, well, when you burn off gas into the atmosphere, it's not a great byproduct. However, if you could fuel data systems, right, for processing in some random open field that is essentially powered by natural gas. So instead of burning it off, you're actually using it to essentially create more, to create a processes that essentially have some output. I've been looking heavy at investing in these products and projects because it's essentially free energy that we're just burning off. And if you
Hmm.
look at the best case scenario of where that energy should be used in the next 30 to 40 years, right? Like, uh, you have to like think about what NVIDIA is doing and how much in demand they are, and then essentially you can make these kind of like jumps to what could be done with a network of some sort of investment like that. So I am definitely looking at the at energy opportunities specific to data and data processing.
And if you're interested more about the AI infrastructure I was talking about, such as the AI agents, the second brain, and the personal assistants, hit the first link below, book a call, and Sequence Loops can help you out with that. And were those energy companies inside of the US or outside?
These are there are about a dozen of them that operate outside of the U.S. And there's the first one came into the U.S. I believe about a year ago, and we're looking at creating an investment pool to essentially mass produce them.
Gotcha. And how do you feel Donald Trump is going to play a role into that? Because I know he's big into oil, but he's also about building the US back up with everything, and especially like those data centers. And because there really aren't a lot in the US, it's all outside and
Mhm.
all around Mexico, but mainly overseas.
It's mainly overseas because the energy is so expensive in the US. It's like you can go
Yeah.
to the Ukraine or Mexico and get energy for whatever, a third of the price. Um, I think that Donald Trump, fundamentally, like this isn't a political statement at all. Like him, love him,
Hmm.
don't like him, don't love him. I think at his core, he's a business person. I think he
Exactly.
thinks at the speed of business. I don't think he's fundamentally a politician. I think he's fundamentally a business person. And most problems he's looking at it not for how do I gain more votes. He's looking at it from how would I solve this problem pragmatically in a free market society, right? It's how I
Hmm.
think. That
Yeah.
like I don't think politically. I don't think like how many votes does this generate or how does this pull people towards me. I think
Yeah.
how am I
Just
fundamentally
logically. Yeah.
yeah, how do I fundamentally solve a problem in a free market society? Is there money to be made? And I'm a cause capitalist. If I can make enough money, I'm going to give it all away anyways. So I actually feel good about making money, right? So it's like
Hmm.
I think that honestly, that's the logic he's bringing into the marketplace, and I think there's going to be a lot of effort and a lot of focus being put towards these issues that you and I are talking about. This is the wave of the future, and I not to be critical at all, but it's like there was such a big push in the last kind of election cycle to move everything towards electric. Well, our infrastructure today cannot handle even a small fraction of our vehicles or the electricity need that's already being created. It already outprices us and essentially helps it makes us offshore everything that is needing electric. It's just like we've got a fundamental infrastructure problem, and if you're going to
Yeah.
move to a more efficient state, you can't just sit here and say global warming, global warming, global warming. You have to say how do we solve our infrastructure, because the infrastructure solves everything. It goes back to that
Hmm.
fun. It's like it's you think like a business person, right? Like what is the fundamental process I have to fix that fixes everything? And to me it's infrastructure.
Yeah. And on top of that, the electric, it's being powered by different sources of energy, which are
Right.
even outputting even more waste. But
Correct.
That have you looked into nuclear fusion at all on top of the
Mm,
energy sector?
I have, I actually had a guy about a month ago come in, and I do a lot of presentations here where people are pitching the private equity firm for investment dollars, and looked at an investment in nuclear fusion, and it is fascinating. I feel like I still lack so much understanding, uh, and I'm not a speculative type of investor. I don't invest in things that I don't typically understand. And it was one of those things that I literally like. I remember writing so many notes down, and most of my notes were, "What is understand this?" Like I was just writing down phrases and words because I felt like he was a scientist who had built a product that essentially could harness nuclear fusion specific to a certain function, and he was so far over my head. I just remember walking out of there going, I have a lot of studying to do because I
Yeah.
would love to invest in something like that, but I feel like I need to have some level of understanding.
Mhm. No, and that's where I feel most people are. They don't understand what's available out there, but
Hmm.
there's just a lot of
Yeah.
different potential. And then back with the infrastructure, how would you go about that? Would you focus more on the energy cycles? Like, tell me how you would go about that, fixing it.
I would tackle it based on need, right? Usually, one of the fundamental processes of business that my father taught me as an entrepreneur is he said, just point all of your effort at solving someone else's issue for something they need, and you'll never lack for resources, you'll never lack for customers. Just solve people's issues, solve their needs. The fundamental base need that we have today is energy, right? Like we are having massive issues, and it's not just electric, it's not just petroleum, it's not just like it's all energy.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to start there. My belief is we have to start there. Now, the question is it horse or cart, right? Like, are you trying to create new types of energy, new innovations in energy, or are you trying to harness what already exists, right?
Hmm.
That's where I don't feel like I have enough base knowledge, and I feel like so many people don't at our level. Like, I feel like unless you are given the data
Fully specialized into it.
that yeah, fully specialized, but also that is really only available. Like I sat on a subcommittee for finance for 4 years. I was in DC. I would go in and they would, and I was given data and privy to data that the average person didn't know. And it was all confidential data. And I sat there and we got to parse down data that it was like, well, if everybody had this data, you could solve the problem very easily. And I feel like a lot of this data is so housed in areas that only benefit. That's why I love decentralization, right? Like to me, it's like democratize all of this, right? Like create a
Mhm.
free market frenzy to allow
See where
people to
everything's
benefit
going.
and
Yep.
see where it goes. Like we to create a monopolistic approach to energy, which is what we truly have today. It's like all you do is stifle all innovation, cheaper products, right? Like it's not
Hmm.
capitalism. Capitalism says let the free market society dictate where we go because innovation will drive us based on the reward of somebody innovating over someone else.
Hmm. And going back to that, do you add the combination of solving a problem you solve for yourself and others, or h- how have
I,
you usually gone about that
I fundamentally try to solve it for others.
for others?
I think oftentimes, I get this question a lot. They'll say, I solve this problem I have in my business with this piece of technology. Do you think that I should make an enterprise version that is going to solve it for everyone else? And the question always begs to be answered, does everybody else need this? Or did you have a flaw that created the need? So I feel like solving it for the masses actually brings so much more testing and viability than trying to solve it for yourself. Because oftentimes, you know, um, our needs, our demands, our desires are not what the general population needs. And so I typically am solving the issues of others rather than solving them for myself.
Quick break. The Art of Systems is linked down below, and that's a free school community where you see the true power of the Art of Systems, AI infrastructures, AI agents, systems for health, any area of life along with the second brain template. There's a mini version for free and a bunch of other templates in there. So go check that out down below. And how do you see it in DC? Because I know you are in the litigation process and in the committee and helping out over there. Where do you see, does energy come into play with the real estate, or is it mainly just focused on real estate?
No, I think energy definitely comes into play.
Yeah.
I think that um, there's a lot of thought on this, but how energy is used also there's a tie between institutional finance, energy, and housing, right? Like,
Hmm.
and there's a cross section there between a lot of different pieces that oftentimes, like and some of the smartest minds in DC right now, believe that if you could solve the energy crisis that we have, you actually can simultaneously solve affordable housing. There's a lot of different ways of doing that, right? Like, what if inside of, like, one of the products I saw was inside of a 3D printed house. There was a solar mechanism that was built into that essentially fed into the grid. And so, like, there's so much technology that we're just not even using, that I think that
Yeah.
it has to be a bigger conversation.
Yeah, when I was in Poland over the summer visiting family, they have like the contracts between powering yourself, but also sending power to the government,
Hmm.
and in return getting a return.
Right.
And that, like on top of the factories that could possibly be built inside of the US,
Hmm.
also helps one employment, but two the housing itself too,
Correct.
with all
Correct.
the real estate that would be built. And I know you touched on a point that there's not that much new construction going on right now,
Hmm.
and also all the loans that are coming due. I asked you in Chicago how you would go about it, and you were saying look at how the consumer spending this winter, and it'll dictate a good portion of how it'll turn out, if it's going to be the big institutions buying it or if it's going to be people like yourself buying the
Hmm.
real estate.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I consumer spending this quarter will dictate a lot, and I believe that where we are headed, is that there is a lack of housing and affordable housing for sure, but housing generally speaking. And so there's enough demand that it's going to create movement somewhere. The question is it institutions moving, or is it individual investors moving? The thing is individual investors don't have enough capital to actually move the needle to solve any of these problems. It
Hmm.
really should be in tandem, both of us moving, but there has to be the right economic circumstance before you're going to see both people move in there.
And in DC, you said that non-accredited investors could get a Series 7 and then be accredited, correct?
So
That came
there,
out a year ago, I believe.
yes. So I sat on the subcommittee and dealt a lot with redefining what accredited investors are.
Hmm.
And there was some different statutes put in there that allowed for those that would be more of a savvy or a sophisticated investor to also act just like an accredited investor. And so part of that was is if they work for a law firm, and that law firm is, like, let's say, a party to a deal itself, right? Like, there's a bunch of different pieces in there that have been written in, and financial licensure was one of those pieces that was written in, that if you're not accredited but you're sophisticated enough that you can analyze a deal, right, then why would you be prevented from, or why would you be treated like an average consumer that they're trying to protect from putting dollars into deals?
Gotcha. And then let's switch points here. What would you recommend to your younger self living, say, around 22, 23 years old in this new time? Like what would you say to your younger self if you're 23 now?
It's a great question. It's one that, I get asked a lot, mainly because there's a lot of young guys like you that are really like pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And I think, though, that I'm very altruistic, I'm very intentional. I think I probably would go back to my 22, 23-year-old self, and I would say, don't shortcut, don't take shortcuts. Give yourself to the process. Um, every bit of pain and struggle you're going to feel in your life is going to prepare you for what you will ultimately experience, which is the benefit of that pain and struggle. And I don't know that I would change anything. Like fundamentally, I am who I am because of what I've gone through in my life. And so it's really hard to question any of it because it's like, I'm in love with the life that I get to live today because of the contribution I get to make in this world. So I don't know that I would change or do anything differently. There are things that I would love to know more about. I wish I would have given myself more to music. I think that I'm a little underdeveloped when it comes to the creative side. Very systematic. I know that as I practiced or I learned guitar or music or sang in college, it was like that was developing a side of me that I wish that I would have developed further because I think that balance is important. But it's like if I was too balanced in that area, do I build all the systems and processes? Am I as systematic as I am? Do I have a systematic way of doing life? Do I have the same success? It's really hard to second guess anything. I think I would just tell myself, stick with it, go through life, don't change, give yourself to the process. And I think that one of the philosophies that I've really grabbed onto early in life, and then later on Malcolm Gladwell wrote about it when he talked about the 10,000 hours that make us essentially an expert. It takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything, which is really 40 hours a week for 7 years. What I've realized in life is there really are no shortcuts. And the people that have taken a shortcut are often fearful because if it was taken away from them, they wouldn't know how to get back to where they are. So what I've just given myself to is whatever time it takes, I'm going to put the time in, but I'm probably going to outwork everybody. If it takes somebody 10 years or 7 years to get to success or to be an expert, how do I shortcut that to a place where I'm just putting in more hours to get there faster? And so, in my younger years, one of the things that made me successful was I didn't watch a lot of TV. I didn't give myself to a lot of things that didn't matter. I didn't have a lot of downtime. Before I built a family, before I had, boys, man, I worked nonstop. I gave myself to the craft I was trying to build. I didn't create a shortcut. I just gave myself more to it. And I really focused on the things I wanted in life. And I gave myself to it. I graduated college when I was 19. I graduated with my master's degree when I was 20. Like I went year round, full out, how do I get to success as fast as I possibly can? And I still do the same thing. I really love working the hours I work. I don't do shortcuts. I just put in more hours because I really believe in that philosophy that you just have to give time to it and you have to put the hours in. And the people that take shortcuts are the ones that oftentimes are second guessing their success. I don't second guess my success. If you put me you literally took me out of the environment I'm in today and you put me in Spain, and I did that in Spain. I created a business and I scaled a business and exited in Spain.
You'd be able to
I
do it
you
back.
know
Yep.
I went to China and literally I scaled a business and I sold it in China, right? One of the most hostile business environments in the world. Like for me, like you can't take away the time I've put in.
Gotcha. No, I love that answer. And is this like, are these the type of conversations you're having with your sons at home?
I'm trying. Yeah. I speak a lot to my sons. My sons it's interesting having three boys because one of the benefits I had as an adult watching, I watched my parents chase their dreams. They helped me have a good relationship with fear and success. Um, I'm trying to do the same thing with my boys, but sometimes in that pursuit of something big, you cast a shadow. And a lot of the conversations that I'm having with my sons is there is no shadow, right? Like there's only pathways, right? Like um, there's a pathway, and we're looking at Mount Everest, and building a business is Mount Everest, and there's actually a path on the hill. You can choose to take that path, right? Or you can choose to take another path. It really is your choice. But there's no shadow, right? Like there is no, well, you're Eddie Wilson's son, so therefore. It's like, no, you are Skylar Wilson, you're Titus Wilson, you're Maddox Wilson. It's like, and so those are the conversations I'm having with my sons. I would say that probably the most unique conversation I have with my sons, though, that I've had with all of them, starting at probably age 4 or 5. And my oldest son is 24, and my youngest son is 10 now. So there's a big spread. Is I've had this conversation with them consistently, and that is that to me, true fulfillment comes in helping someone else. Real fulfillment isn't selling a company or buying another house or a car. Real fulfillment is actually helping someone else get to a place where they're successful because you help them, um, whatever that success is. And I have conversations with my sons consistently that say something like this: what impact on this world are you going to make? Not what are you going to build, what car are you going to drive, what house are you going to live in, where are you going to live at, what, like what's relationships look like. It's what impact are you going to make and what does that look like? I want them dreaming at a young age about impacting the world, making the world a better place, providing something back to the world rather than getting something from the world. Most kids are taught to dream about what they get. I'm going to be a firefighter. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to drive this Lamborghini, right? I don't want my kids to dream about what they're going to get from this world. I want them to dream about what impact they're going to make on it. Because as you actually make impact on the world gives you it's like it's the energy just gives all of it back to you. People that chase capital, money, oftentimes it eludes them. um, do you think Elon Musk was chasing the ability to be a billionaire? No, I think Elon Musk was literally trying to, in everything he's trying to solve fundamental problems. When he started Tesla, he was like, I want to change the way that humans travel. He didn't say, I want to be a billionaire. It was like, I want to change the way humans move from point A to point B. I think it's
Just a
inefficient today,
byproduct.
and the byproduct is the world is it rewards you when you solve the problems, the greater problems. And so to me, the more I can get my sons to focus on impact, they'll have everything else in their life that they want. If I just try to get them to focus on buying the Lamborghini by the time that they're 25, or becoming independently wealthy by the time they're 22, whatever it is, which is what everyone is told to do, in the end you chase the wrong things.
No, I love that you're teaching your sons that they have the freedom of choice, and then you're teaching them to have that intent on bringing in fulfillment through helping others, because
Mhm.
that's really powerful, and a lot of people are missing that nowadays.
For sure.
But Eddie Wilson, it's been a pleasure having you on. This conversation was great, and I really appreciate your time. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for everything.
Appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
If you enjoy this podcast with Eddie, I know you're going to enjoy this one. Also, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and comment who you'd like to see next. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day.